Alrighty. Hello, everybody, and thank you for hopping on to our webinar today. Uh, as we wait a bit to allow people to get on to our briefing for New Jersey, the state of the Garden State, excuse me, we're going to start you out with a warm-up poll. So our question for our warm-up poll is, does Central Jersey exist? We asked the whole state of New Jersey to see what they thought. And we're going to give you maybe like 2 minutes to let folks funnel in and answer the question. Again, for folks just now hopping on, you'll see our warm-up question where we ask the state of New Jersey, does Central Jersey really exist? Let us know what you think. We are going to close the poll in a couple of seconds. All right, and that's time. So let's end this poll and see what you guys think. And 67% of you agree that New Jersey is a state, and that's actually really close to what we found when we polled the state of New Jersey. 70% of New Jersey believes that Central Jersey does actually exist. All right. Thank you guys for participating in our warm-up poll. Again, today we're going to be discussing New Jersey and perceptions of America in the state as we gear up for election season this year. I know it says here that our chat will be open, but our chat will actually be closed today. But we will keep Q&A open for you guys. Feel free to ask any questions as they come up into your mind, and we will answer questions at the end of our webinar today. And joining us today, well, one, I'm Kamel Ash, the Marketing and Communications Manager here with Change Research. Ashley Kellerman is not here with us today, but we would like to acknowledge her as she's done a lot of hard work for us to bring this presentation to you today. A little bit later, you're going to hear from Matt Booker, our analyst, and he works with coordinated and candidate campaigns. And he's also from New Jersey, as well as myself. I'm from South Jersey. He is from North Jersey. Maybe he'll tell you a little bit more about him as he goes on, but I'm from Willingboro, Burlington County. And I'm going to hand it over to Melanie Phillips, our head of analyst team.
Thanks so much, Kamel. Happy to be here. I'm just going to give us a quick little intro and a little bit about Change if you're new. So Change Research was founded in 2017 after the 2016 elections, where a lot of us really were taking a hard look at what we're doing in the polling field. And we wanted to create a company and an ethos that was fast, accurate, and affordable. All of our surveys are completed online. We do not rely on panels of semi-professional survey takers, and we recruit participants using both probability and non-probability methods that allows us to get accurate readings and measures of where people are and where they're at. We have a couple products that we have at Change Research. We have a Spark, which is a candidate viability poll that runs fast and quick if you're looking for candidate messaging or coordinated candidate efforts. We also use custom modeling. We've really been on the front end of the AI revolution when it comes to polling and AI work and big data. And we supplement that with qualitative work, which those of us in the field know is incredibly valuable, either with in-depth interviews or text-based chats. All of this together makes us, on the next slide, um, a company that we believe is changing the game in polling. We are finding that we are about 2 times as fast as legacy pollers. This is because our methods allow us to get into the field, and also we have incredible analysts like Matt Booker who are right on the ball with everything that needs to be happening in this moment. And our methods are more accurate. Every accuracy test and internal research science test we've posted, which you can see on our website, finds that we're about 25% more accurate than the next closest pollster, especially one of our key points was in 2020. And we have a similar 2024 report up as well. And the big thing is we're affordable. Because of our methods, we've been able to cut down the cost of polling, which makes us not just affordable, but accessible. Research should be accessible to everyone who wants to get in the game and who needs to understand what people are thinking at this moment. And all of this comes together in the next slide by making that we don't just do polls, we've built an ecosystem. We have over 300 million data points that allows us to really contextualize, and we have some exciting products that allow both our analysts and our clients to really look at where their data sits in situations and in context with this vast ecosystem of public opinion data that we make right accessible through our portal. And so one of the new things we're excited to highlight is the Compass Poll Insider subscription. So Compass polls are our Change Research monthly survey that track how Americans feel about key political, business, and cultural issues. They instantly go from questions to action with our AI-powered data portal, which is an incredible tool that, especially if you, like many of us, have sat and looked at hundreds of crosstabs and really kind of puzzled at what to do with all this data, this data portal makes the actions accessible to anyone. If you're interested in potentially getting access to the Compass poll and our monthly data, as well as our larger ecosystem, we're launching a new subscription service. So if you're curious about this, you can email us at subscriptions@changeresearch.com. And you can get a demo of the portal, which I highly recommend because it's very cool, and get a sense of what this might look like for your company. But besides that, I'm going to hand it over to the real star of the show. And as someone who's not from New Jersey, sadly, I will stay silent for the rest of this and let the people from New Jersey really tell you what's going on. So looking forward to it, Matt.
Thank you, Melanie. So, hello, everyone. I'm super excited to have everybody here today. Um, like Kamel said, I'm an analyst here at Change, but more importantly, also like Kamel said, I'm from New Jersey. I've lived in New Jersey my whole life, North Jersey. I went to Rutgers, so New Jersey's so in my blood, and I'm super excited to talk about some of the topical issues New Jersey voters are thinking about right now. So we're going to quickly walk through the agenda that we have set up here. We're just going to quickly run through what the sample looks like and the methodology for the survey. Melanie kind of talked about it a little bit. Some early Trump reviews. How are voters feeling about this first 100 days of Trump? And really why we wanted to do New Jersey for this one is that dual purpose of having some data on Trump's 100 days, but also New Jersey voters are unique alongside Virginia voters that they will be weighing in this year. So not to say that New Jersey voters are more important than others. I might say that because I'm from here, but they just have a chance to weigh in earlier on, what they feel like, have a reaction at the voting booth to what's going on with the Trump presidency so far. Third, obviously, the economy has been a big issue. It's been the top of mind for a long time, but especially in the last month or so with, tariff news and things like that. So we wanted to get some reviews on Trump and the economy, and then also issues related to the state itself, how voters in the state are feeling about certain issues, quality of life, things like that. So we dive into that. And then last, as Kamel pointed out, we'll have some time for questions at the end of the survey, at the end of the presentation. So this is a quick overview of our sample. We had talked to 932 voters in New Jersey from April 18th to April 22nd. Melanie kind of talked about our sample recruiting. We use targeted ads on social media and text to web that we match back to a voter file. And we weighted the survey on age, gender, race, and ethnicity, regions, so regions of the state that we broke out using the counties, education, and 2024 presidential vote. We used 2020 or recalled presidential vote as our main partisanship measure. Partisanship self-ID is a little bit of a nebulous concept, and a lot of states don't have party registration. New Jersey does, but a lot of times it's not sorted correctly. A lot of Republicans vote Democratic, vice versa. So we found that waiting on recalled vote is, our most precise method of trying to gauge some sort of partisanship. And we have a margin of error of 3.4 percentage points. So this is a quick overview of our sample. We have 63% white and then about 37% people of color. Like I said, the recall vote +6 for Kamala Harris. We'll get into that in a little bit. In New Jersey, a little bit more of an educated state, one of the most educated states in the country, actually. So we have 42% with a college degree, which is higher than the national average of 34% nationwide. So before we dive into the actual, meat of the data, we wanted to give some background because there is a lot of interesting things going on in New Jersey under the hood electorally, and the survey data that we have kind of brings some of that to life. So as you can see here, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won New Jersey by 14 points, which was pretty standard at the time. It was a two-time Obama state. But in 2020, Joe Biden really put on a show here. He flipped counties like Morris County, North Jersey, and deepened the Democratic margins in some counties like Middlesex in the central part of the state. And it was a big win. It was improved on Hillary's 2016 margin, and he did really well in South Jersey. But 2024 rolls around, and most of those gains, if not all of them, wiped out. Kamala Harris does not do well in South Jersey. Morris County flips back, and maybe most importantly, Passaic County up here, home to Patterson and cities like Wayne, flipped into the Republican column for the first time in a really, really long time at the presidential level. So New Jersey did see a very, very large rightward swing. And a lot of people have had theories on why this may have happened. And this survey data that we have kind of gives credence to a few of them. The first one, a decline in turnout among Democratic leaning voters in the state. Secondly, new voters, so people who are new to the process, so either people who weren't eligible to vote in 2020, so think, people who were born in the mid-2000s who are just now eligible to vote, or people that just were eligible and didn't vote, but then also people who flipped their vote from Joe Biden in 2020 to Trump in 2024. This is going to be one of our key groups throughout this presentation. This group kind of amalgamated together. It's not a huge swath of voters, but certainly enough to have an impact on elections in the state. And third, Kamala Harris failed to make those same gains that Joe Biden did with more affluent and educated voters. Like I said, Joe Biden, that was the strength. That's really what powered him. I know the election overall in 2020 was very close, but in states that were more highly educated, such as New Jersey, such as Massachusetts, Maryland, Joe Biden had really, really high margins because he did really, really well with these more affluent and educated voters. And according to the survey data, Kamala Harris did not make those same gains with Joe Biden with that same crop of voters. So our 2024 non-voters. So overall, these are not strongly partisan Democrats. The takeaway here is not that, if these 2024 non-voters that we have from this survey, if they had showed up in 2024, Kamala Harris would have won by Biden's margin. That's not the takeaway here. But the takeaway here is the fact that these voters did not vote probably hurt Kamala Harris more than it hurt Donald Trump, because their recalled 2024 vote or 2020 vote was Joe Biden 36-10. Half of them didn't vote in 2020. Their party ID, Democratic, but not overwhelmingly, because 50% are still identify as independents, and 55% identify as unaffiliated, but almost a third identify as Democrats. And for Trump favorability, they have a strongly unfavorable opinion of Donald Trump. So these are not the most Trump-friendly voters. So the people who sat out in 2024, again, not overwhelmingly, like this is not a group that would have made up 10 points for Kamala Harris, but it definitely hurt her more than it hurt Donald Trump, the fact that they didn't participate. So like I said, this is going to be a big group throughout the survey. Small chunk, 7% of voters overall fall into this new Trump coalition of young voters who just aged into the voting process, people who didn't vote in 2020, or people who switched their vote. It makes up about 7% of the overall New Jersey voters. And they're really, really interesting. 56% of these new Trump voters are people of color. 72%, so almost 3 out of 4 are under 50. And to kind of underscore that these are new Trump voters and not really, hardcore rock-ribbed longtime Republicans, a full 22% of them self-identify as Democrats. And about a quarter identify as blue-collar workers. That's going to be another theme as we get into our talk about the economy. Blue-collar workers versus service workers versus knowledge workers, people that work from home versus people that work in like services like healthcare, retail, and people that work in like manufacturing, construction, all kind of diverge in very interesting ways on their views of the economy. And our third group, is those affluent voters that we were talking about, and you can kind of just see that those gains didn't happen. In some cases, the gains were for Trump. And so if you look at the recalled vote overall, suburban NYC, so people that live in, the North Jersey suburbs, Bergen County, suburban Essex County, these kind of, wealthy North Jersey suburbs, Kamala Harris lost a few points from Joe Biden's margin, according to the self-reported data. Knowledge workers, so those tech workers, those remote workers, lost a good amount of points. Kamala Harris lost a good amount of points there. 50 to 100K middle class-ish voters lost a few points. 100K plus in terms of income lost a few points. White men with a college degree lost a few points, and Donald Trump gained a few points with all these groups. So this was another problem for Kamala Harris, that Joe Biden really, really did well with all of these groups in 2020, and not only did Kamala not match that, Kamala Harris in many cases with New Jersey voters slipped a little bit. So all three of those combined, not the only reasons, but big reasons that people have talked about, and the survey data backs up that these contributed to a 10-point slip in margin for Democrats in 2024. So we're going to get into the meat of it now. Early reviews of the Trump administration from New Jersey voters. So overall, usually this slide, when we just have our little battery of people, of organizations, and we ask, do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of them? Usually sort this by by total favorable. But nobody in New Jersey really has a high favorability rating, so we sorted this by unfavorability. And Elon Musk, Donald Trump, the MAGA movement, JD Vance tops the list. But interestingly, the Democratic Party is very heavily underwater. And one reason for that is, if you look at the Republican Party, 90% of Republicans have a favorable view of the GOP, but just 62% of Democrats have a favorable view of the Democratic Party. So you kind of see that. You see national surveys, which there have been a ton of. You kind of see that over and over again, that Democrats are not happy with how the party is responding to the Trump administration. And you're seeing that in states like New Jersey, where you only get 12% of Democrats have a very favorable opinion of the party. That's a low number. 13% have a somewhat unfavorable opinion of the party. So, you get numbers like that. And also, interestingly, the governor, who was not up for re-election this year, Phil Murphy, two-term governor, underwater as well. So for Trump himself, his approval rating is pretty low in the state of New Jersey. Almost half strongly disapprove, 54% disapprove overall. One thing that a lot of Democrats have been wondering is there going to be this come to Jesus moment with Trump voters, that, having buyer's remorse on, voting for Trump? That's been a big talking point on the left. And does the data support that? Not really. If you look at a lot of polls that have been done, we did a national poll last month that showed that not a lot of voters regret their vote. So I would say there's not a lot of buyer's remorse yet. However, you can see failure modes within the data here. You can see areas where some of the new Trump voters, some of these new people in this coalition, are not super happy. For example, if you see Trump voters, so people who voted for Trump in 2020 and 2024, almost 3 out of 4 have a very strongly approve of the job he's doing. But for these new Trump voters, these people that were not part of his coalition in 2020, only 36%, only about a third, have strongly approve of the job he's doing. And to kind of underscore, we talked about this earlier, the people who did not participate in the 2024 election strongly disapprove of the job Trump's doing as well. Almost half have a disapprove of his job. So for this one, we kind of tried to do a little heat map type of thing. On the left, you see where our question where we ask people, what are the top 2 or 3 issues facing the country today? And then on the right, we ask people, what do you think? So kind of that same question, but what do you think the most important issue has been for Donald Trump since he's become president? And as you can see for the one on the left, it doesn't give, there's a lot. There's a lot of things that people are concerned about: democracy, corruption, costs, whether that's groceries, whether that's the economy, whether that's cost of housing, healthcare, taxes. There's a lot of things that people list as concerns, but people have kind of zeroed in on 2 things, maybe 3 if you wanted to distant third, but immigration and trade policy have dominated Trump's agenda, and then the shrinking of the federal government. But you see here, lowering the cost of living and creating jobs and improving the economy. Only 11% combined say that that's Trump's top priority. But you see here, look at the costs. That's very high for people. Jobs, very, very high. The only issue that really Trump is meeting voters on is immigration. But voters are very unhappy, we'll see that a little bit later on, with the economy. And it's still their top concern, but they don't see Trump focused on that. And even also, we'll see later, that includes many members of his 2024 coalition. So again, trying to suss out a little bit, is there softening of Trump support? Is there any cracks? Like, that, like I said, the buyer's remorse, not yet. Life is very long. We're only 100, probably 105 days in or whatever it is. But are there cracks in Trump's coalition? So we asked among people who voted for Trump, but less than strongly approve of his job performance. So either somewhat approve or disapprove outright. What are some concerns? Like, not regrets that you have about voting for Trump, but what are some concerns that you have about Trump's presidency so far? And host of things that we laid out here, but I think that the most important part is who said none, who has no concerns about Trump. So 27% of Trump voters who fall into this category have no concerns. But when you look at the younger Trump voters, the younger Trump voters and Trump voters of color, they are much more likely to have a concern. None of these is a lot lower, especially when you compare it to older Trump voters and white Trump voters. And that runs the gamut of reasons: international issues, his communication style, his handling of domestic issues, chaoticness is over indexed with POC voters. So you, like I said, not necessarily regret, remorse yet, but you can see failure modes. You can see where, if there's going to be a moment where dam kind of breaks, you can kind of see why that might sort of happen for voters in New Jersey who voted for Donald Trump in 2024. And lots of voters in New Jersey are concerned about Doge, which is obviously, it's kind of taken a little bit of a backseat, but obviously in the early days of the Trump administration, very, very big topic. And a lot of people have heard a lot about it. 63% have heard a lot about Doge's activity. And over half are either very or somewhat concerned. 56% are either very or somewhat concerned about the activity that the Department of Government Efficiency has been undertaking. So we asked those people, that half of voters who are either very or somewhat concerned, what exactly about Doge is concerning you? And it kind of ranks into three tiers. Number one is a tier and it's unto itself, Social Security. 75% just about of voters in New Jersey who are concerned about Doge are concerned about Social Security. That is the king. That is the top concern for people that have been concerned about Doge. That's the number one thing people are concerned about seeing cut. Kind of a second tier forms of kind of quality of life type issues. Department of Education, things related to healthcare like the CDC or the FDA, so regulatory agencies like that, and then also Medicare. So you kind of see health education kind of forming its own tier. And then a third tier of miscellaneous other things like transportation safety, the National Weather Service, IRS, foreign aid kind of brings up the rear, but you kind of see tiers forming of people are really concerned about Social Security, really still good amount concerned about some of the quality of life stuff, and then a little bit lower some of that other miscellaneous, just general government functioning stuff. So now the economy. I told you that we were going to talk a little bit about employment types, and just to kind of give you a quick rundown of that, we have our blue collar workers who strongly backed Trump in 2024. This was out of all employment types, his strongest coalition. And a lot of them over-indexed. I think about 6% of our sample overall were Hispanic men, and more, almost triple that. 15% of these blue collar workers here are Hispanic men, and that's obviously a group that's been highly discussed in terms of how are they voting, what are they thinking about. So that's kind of one group here. We have service workers who skew very, very heavily towards women, non-college, especially women of color. Lots of these people who identify as service workers are Black women and Hispanic women. Knowledge workers, these are kind of that wealthier. If you think back to that slide where, we had higher incomes and the people in suburban North Jersey and things like that, kind of over indexes on Asian voters in that category as well. And retirees who are obviously heavily over indexed on 50 plus, but we wanted to get a read on them too, because there's been a lot of talk about things like retirement savings, which for this question, a list of things that are costs that are concerning to people, what do you worry the most about? Retirement savings were towards the top. So that was one reason we wanted to include retirees, because even though they're not participants in the workforce, they're obviously still very heavily enmeshed with our economy. So things people are concerned about, lots: paying for groceries, retirement savings, healthcare services, paying your rent or mortgages. That's especially acute for younger voters. Paying utility bills. There's a lot of concerns overall. And the group here that is the most overall cost concerns are these blue collar voters. They have the most cost anxiety. They're more likely to say they're worried about paying their utility bills than voters overall. They're more likely to say they're worried about taxes than voters overall. They're more worried about retirement savings, essentials. So there's a lot of areas where these blue collar voters, again, Trump voters, are saying that they are not satisfied with how things are going for them economically. So it's not as much a lot of talk about surveys flipping. Are Republicans going to all of a sudden think the economy is good? In some cases, maybe, but the blue collar workers here have genuine, it wasn't a partisan thing for them. The data shows here that they genuinely believe that their financial state is still tough. And it wasn't just a 2024 election concern. It's still at the top of mind for a lot of those voters. So when we asked, Trump overall, how is he handling things? And now we ask, how is he handling the economy as president? Still not good. Almost half of voters in the state strongly disapprove of the job he's doing on the economy, 48%, and a further 8% someone disapprove. And to kind of go back to the point I was talking about before, these blue collar workers who are largely part of Trump's coalition, about a quarter of them strongly disapprove. So overall, they still approve of the job he's doing. But again, that's not a low amount. A third, 33% plus disapproving of the job he's doing from largely Trump voters is not a small amount. So you're seeing that even there's some dissatisfaction kind of brewing with some voters who backed Trump in 2024. So when we just asked overall, how would you rate the nuts and bolts of the economy? And people are not happy with the nuts and bolts of the economy. Inflation, cost of living, very poor ratings, not so good or poor, very high. The economy overall, not so good or poor, very high. America's trade relationships, not so good, poor, very high. Stock market, same. Personal finances, much higher. So people express more positivity about their personal financial situations than they do with the economy at large. However, even though that this kind of does stay for various subgroups, most subgroups here, most worker types are happy about their financial situation. Look at Trump voters, long time. So these are people that have been with Trump for a long time. We didn't ask about 2016, but probably was with him then, but they were definitely with him in 2020, 2024. They are very happy with their financial state. Almost 60% say it's excellent or good. These new Trump voters, so the people that had a lot of, they're very price sensitive, cost sensitive, they are more likely to rate their personal finances as poor. So again, it's not like a partisan thing. It's not these people voted for Trump, came into Trump's coalition and then automatically said, okay, I'm a partisan Republican. I'm just going to keep the party line and say the economy is good. They still have concerns about the economy. They're still worried about cost and they're worried about their personal finances. So more than half of voters believe tariffs will have a negative effect on the economy. 55% say that it's going to have a negative effect, and 34% say that it will have a positive effect. And then there's a smaller group, about 10%, who aren't sure or don't think either way, or don't think it will have an effect either way. So as we all know, or most, it's been in the news a lot, that there has been a lot of talk about the tariff since April 2nd, since Liberation Day. And people are still kind of split on what exactly the goal of the tariffs is. What is the tariff policy about? Democrats largely believe the tariffs are a bargaining tactic, while Republican voters are split. And then you see about almost a quarter, or almost 1 in 5 voters are unsure of what the goal of the tariff policy is overall. So look, we have tariffs are a bargaining chip used to negotiate trade deals with other countries. 47% think that. 35% think that it's a real attempt, that it's not just bluster, it's not just negotiating, it's not the art of the deal. This is a real deal attempt to get manufacturing jobs back. And that's the line mostly of GOP voters and blue collar voters. But you see a kind of a split here. Still like 4 in 10 think that, yeah, it's a bargaining chip. So as I showed earlier, for voters in this state, they think that tariffs are one of Trump's signature policy, but there's no real consensus on what they actually are about, even among his base of supporters. So shifting to New Jersey, why we're all here. New Jersey itself, what are voters in the Garden State thinking about what's going on right here for them? So we asked kind of that excellent, good, not so good, poor question that we asked about the macro economy, and we asked that for just various things about the state. And people like living in New Jersey in an abstract sense. They like the parks and open spaces. That's something people are happy with. Recreation and entertainment options. If you live in South Jersey, you get to Philly really quick, right? If you live up here with me in North Jersey, you get to New York. People are happy with their recreation options. Healthcare access, good. Overall quality of life, solid. But then you look at the bottom here, almost universal discussed with housing costs, cost of living, roads and infrastructure rate pretty poorly. So under the surface, there's a lot of things that New Jerseyans are not happy about, even though, there's a lot to like about their state. They're really not happy with certain things that are going on, especially as they relate to costs. So I'm sure you're probably wondering, and when are we going to talk about the governor's race? Right? When are we going to talk about the governor's race? We did not ask a horse race question for the primaries in this, mostly because this is a general audience. This is all voters. And, we didn't, wait to a primary electorate or anything like that. So we wanted to just kind of broadly get a sense of issues and things like that for voters. But fear not, we did ask about the governor's race, kind of in an abstract sense. We asked what there will be elections in New Jersey this year. Which of the following traits are the most important for the next governor of New Jersey to have? So we kind of broke this up. There's a couple of slides on this. We broke this up: registered Democrats, registered Republicans, and then later on we'll show some of those new Trump voters. So registered Democrats and registered Republicans, because New Jersey has a close primary, are going to get to weigh in soon, next month in June, on who they want to be their nominees. So we wanted to see what these people that are going to the polls next month, what are they thinking about? So registered Democrats here, they really want someone that's going to fight against Trump. That 74% of registered Democrats rank that as one of their top traits they want to see in their next governor. But also they want to see someone with like leadership experience, and that kind of tracks with Democrats, liking a steady hand and things like that. So they want someone with leadership experience in New Jersey, record of accomplishment in government, and similar to all voters, a detailed plan for New Jersey's future. So what are Republicans? They also have a primary next month. What are they thinking about? What do they want for their next governor? And the thing that they're most top thing is they want someone who will support the Trump administration, but they do actually want real things. Registered Republicans want to see major reforms and changes made to New Jersey, and they're more likely, as you see here, more likely to say they want someone from outside of politics or someone who hasn't been a politician in DC to be their next governor, which is higher than voters overall. And these new Trump voters, to kind of underscore that they are not the hardcore MAGA types. We showed here 65% of Republicans want to see someone who will support the Trump administration's actions. For those new Trump voters, it's only about 34%. So higher than Democrats, obviously, but almost right in line, right near the margin of error for being with all voters. So that's not their top priority. Their not top priority is not to be a hardcore MAGA partisan Republican. They want things done. They want to see things happen. And that's why some of the issues that rose to the top for them, having a detailed workable plan, major reforms to New Jersey, more likely than voters overall to say they want to see bipartisan legislation and someone who'll make deals. So they are focused on things getting done, which kind of vibes with the idea that, they want their costs lowered. They're concerned about they having anxiety about various costs, about prices, about their personal financial situation. So they want to see this things change, things happen. And that kind of underscores here with the options that many of them selected. So property taxes, this is finally, I know that a lot of this data has been dour, but this is an area where you have broad agreement among homeowners in New Jersey. Property taxes are too high. We asked kind of two situations we laid out. Are property taxes too high in New Jersey and they should be lowered, even if it means some cuts to local services? Or are property taxes necessary to keep our local services funded at a high level? People really don't want property taxes. 69% said they're too high and should be lowered, even if it means cuts. You see that across employment types and even partisanship. Independents and self-identified Republicans largely want to see property tax cuts. Even Democrats, the party that, public service, public good, government can do great things. Even they, homeowners who self-ID as Democrats, split right down the middle within the margin of error. So you can basically look at that and say right 50-50 among Democrats for cutting property taxes, even if it means services are cut. So this goes along with the cost. Things are just really tight for homeowners in New Jersey and, renters as well. So this is just a really, I can't emphasize it enough. That's an issue people are thinking a lot about. So then we just asked some general support or oppose, just issues that have either been brought up in the campaign or brought up in, legislation that might come up this year. And people are really on board with banning the use of cell phones in K through 12 schools in New Jersey. People are on board with this. Has been a little bit talked about in the governor's race, banning smoking in casinos in Atlantic City. That has broad support. And This has been a really big thing for the folks who are not from New Jersey. This has been you see it on the news all the time about congestion pricing in New York. And there's been some talk about having a reverse congestion pricing plan. People who drive from New York who come into New Jersey, should they have to have a toll on them to enter New York? And there is support for that. It's not as strong, it's not as robust as banning cell phones and banning smoking in Atlantic City casinos, but it does get 10 plus 10 points, 48 to 38 in terms of strongly or somewhat support that issue. So we wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive into housing. A lot of people talk about, I mean, it's kind of almost just, we didn't even need to pull that. Like if I could have just told you that housing was going to be one of people's top concerns, and it was, but we wanted to see what exactly about housing has got people like, obviously it's the too much income, but there's got to be more things that people are thinking about when it comes to housing. It's a complex issue. It's obviously been one for a long time, but it hasn't been solved. So what are people really concerned about? And to the top, spending too much of your monthly income on housing, that makes sense. But one that I found really interesting is the young people being priced out of living in New Jersey due to high housing costs rose right to the top. It was right behind or right in the same area as spending too much of your monthly income. So you see that New Jersey residents are not just thinking about it from their point of view. They're thinking about housing as it impacts, as an existential thing. We have young, talented people who, come here and or grow up here and go to schools here and go to college here. And a lot of them can't afford to live in the places that they grew up or, whatever the case may be. And that's a concern for voters here that those people are not going to be able to afford to live in New Jersey. So you see housing as an income thing, for people themselves as a kitchen table issue, but also as kind of a societal thing that, what is this impacting on the people who live here or the people who prospectively could live here? So that's our hard data. I have this little grab bag question. We usually ask a few fun questions, kind of like that Central Jersey one. But one thing about polling is that it has this ability to ignite discovery in things that you might not even think are relevant. There's just so many different areas where you can find patterns and find new little morsels of information. And these are kind of silly-ish questions, but they had really interesting patterns that showed in the data. Well, maybe this one's not so silly. So we asked about New Jersey's, one of their most famous laws. Would you support or oppose allowing people to pump their own gas at self-service stations? And we found voters were pretty split. Oppose leading, but narrowly. But what I found really, really interesting is that men overwhelmingly back having pump their own gas. And, when we were talking about this, Melanie and I were talking about this question when we were drafting the survey. And she said, the most dangerous place for a woman in America is after 5 p.m. at the gas station. And women in New Jersey largely disagree or largely agree with that. 61% oppose self-service. They want to stay in their cars and have the gas pumped for them. So it's just always fascinating to me when you have conversations like that and the polling data brings that to life. It's always one of my favorite parts of the process. And we asked this question. One of our research directors, Stephen Claremont, is extremely Gen X, and he demanded that we have this question where we ask Bon Jovi or Bruce Springsteen. And this almost might have been our fun question at the beginning, but I found some interesting patterns within the data. 35% of voters overall say Bon Jovi, 27% say Springsteen, 38% say neither. But there's breaks in partisanship, which mystified me, but more I thought about it, kind of makes sense. Democrats are kind of split between Bon Jovi and Springsteen, but Republicans are overwhelmingly pro Bon Jovi. And just to kind of put a bow on this presentation and say this is kind of the thesis that new Trump voters are not overwhelmingly MAGA. New Trump voters like Springsteen more than Bon Jovi, which is closer to Democrats than they are to Republicans. So thank you for hanging in. I know this was a lot of data. I'm going to kick this back to Kamel. She's going to, I guess, facilitate the Q&A, but I appreciate you all coming and hanging out with me.
All right. Thank you guys for joining our briefing today on all things New Jersey politics. If you have any questions, please feel free to share them in our Q&A box. Right now, you see this QR code where you will gain access to our data portal, where we have, again, over 300 million data points that may support any campaigns that you're working on or any work that you're working on across the country and here in New Jersey. So if you'd like to learn more about our data portal, you can demo it for free. Uh, Feel free to go ahead and check out our QR code. Now I'm going to do a final poll for you all. So our end of the webinar poll, where we ask, after this, would you like to maybe meet with a member of our team to discuss research opportunities for you and your organization? Learn more about our nonpartisan work. So some of you may work with a nonpartisan organization, and we do have a nonpartisan team. That is our Embold Research Company. And then lastly, if you would like to sign up for Change Research newsletters and stay up to date on any information that we have coming out, as we spoke earlier, we do this compass polling every month, where we are really tapped into the news cycle and figuring out what's important right now across the country. And even though it is a lot of the times more looked into the national side of public opinion research, it can still be impactful as we are gearing up for the New Jersey election. So I want to make sure that you guys have access to all of the resources that we have here at Change Research. And if you have any questions or you want any more information, you can all feel free to reach out to me. And so far, we just have one question from Ross, who asked, to what extent do we think the Biden-Trump sub-demo shifts can be attributed to turnout decline, Matt?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about it because that we broke that out in the crosstabs, which will be available at some point, right, Camille? Yes. So about 57% of within that subgroup of voters who were those Biden to Trump, new Trump voters, whatever you want to call them, about 57% of them were vote switchers. So that leaves people who voted for Biden in 2020 and then flipped to Trump, and then 43% were people who were those younger Gen Zs, people who were, born in, 2003, 2004, who weren't able to vote in 2000 or 2020 and now can vote, or people that just didn't participate. So leaned a little bit in favor of vote switchers, but both were pretty significant chunks. So we had, a turnout differential make up a really big number of it, but then also people who voted for Biden and switched their vote also made up a very significant chunk. So it's you can't say one is necessarily more important than the other, even though a little bit higher number comes from those Biden Trump switchers, but they were both large enough to make an impact on that total number.
Thank you, Matt. Ken Badger asks, Passaic County has one of our, excuse me. I'm sorry. Passaic County has one of our largest Muslim populations. During our on-the-ground field outreach, we found many of the voters are one-issue voters and didn't support Democrats because of Gaza and Israel. Do you have any specific data on this?
I can't speak to that specifically. That's a little bit granular for the data that we collected with this survey. However, I can say with Passaic County to kind of maybe extrapolate a little bit of that point with District 9, which is we broke data out by congressional district as well. And District 9, which is anchored around Patterson and some other areas of Passaic County, shifted pretty heavily. It was a strongly Democratic district and voted for Trump last time. And the data kind of backs that the same way. It was a district that voted for Trump or voted for Biden pretty heavily based on recalled vote. And I think in our recalled vote, that district voted for Trump by about 5 points this time. So you see it and, you look at the data, it's largely people of color. It's, probably about 20% white. It's mostly Hispanic, I guess, Black, Muslim as well. So you can kind of extrapolate from the shifts that we're seeing in the data, even though we didn't ask that specific, get that granular with subgroups to have like, Muslims or whatever the case may be. But you can kind of extrapolate that any groups that fall into, that are heavy in Passaic County, heavy in that district, those voters of color, that kind of meshes with the fact that those Biden Trump voters, those new Trump voters are largely people of color. So it's a little bit of extrapolation there, but you can, kind of confidently say that there was either turnout decline with groups like that or outright they just flipped to Trump.
And of course, if there's any interest in digging deeper into religious communities and looking at their, voting history or lack thereof, we'd be happy to run surveys for you to get additional information. Uh, if there are no further questions, I'm going to hand it over to Matt and Melanie, see if there's anything else that you guys would like to share before we close.
No, I would just say thanks so much for being here. And yeah, definitely scan that QR code, especially with the crosstabs, especially with the last question. I do think we asked an issue importance, and you might be able to look a little bit into that. I think we'll have a sample size issue, which I think is why Matt's talking about extrapolating, but definitely echo Kamel's work that we could really dig into that district specifically, and look at that population. What about you, Matt? Anything?
No, I just appreciate it was a long deck and a lot of data, so appreciate everyone coming and hanging out with us.
Yes, thank you all. We look forward to continuing working with you and sharing information. There's a lot more to discover. Have a good one. Happy Friday.